Hi, you guys. Hey, hope you're doing well. We're going to go over solving some two-step equations here. And these are equations that include fractions and decimals. So they seem harder, but they're really not. You're still going to be using inverse operations to isolate your variable. So almost always your first step will be adding or subtracting a term, and then multiplying or dividing, or perhaps multiplying an expression by a reciprocal to isolate that variable. So two steps, almost always add and subtract first, add or subtract, and then either multiply or divide. Hopefully you've printed out this paper, solving two-step equations. We have a total of 8 problems here, and we're going to go through the solutions for all 8. It's going to take a few minutes. I'm going to try to go rather slowly and kind of explain things to you. So if you need to pause this video, just pause it. I would suggest that you take notes on this paper or copy down the questions so that you're doing the steps with me, just like if we were in class. Okay, our first problem reads, x divided by 3.4 minus 2.7 equals negative 2.2, okay? X divided by 3.4. There's our variable x. We want to look for the variable all the time and see what operations are being performed on it. The first operation was division, and then we had 2.7 subtracted from it. We go in reverse order. We're going to add 2.7 to both sides of that equation first. So let me show you this paper. Sorry, I don't have like a real fancy way of doing this. So as you can see here, we've added 2.7 to both sides of the equation. That eliminates the negative 2.7. Okay, it's negative 2.7, positive 2.7 cross out. When you add 2.7 to the other side, to the negative 2.2, you have different signs and you have to subtract those numbers. When you subtract them, you're going to get 5/10, 0.5 on the right-hand side of the equation. So the new equation that we have right here is x divided by 3.4 equals 0.5. X has been divided by 3.4, so we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 3.4. When multiplied by 3.4, they cancel out. Over here, 3.4 times 0.5 gives us 1.7. You could plug that 1.7 into the equation, put it in place of x, divide it by 3.4, then subtract 2.7, and you will get negative 2.2. So you can check these. I'm not going to go through and check them, but remember you're plugging in your answer for the variable and then working out what's been done to that variable to see if you get what it equals. Okay, the next question, 5 equals a minus 4.5 divided by 3. Okay, now remember I said sometimes you will, almost always you're going to add and subtract first, but sometimes you won't. And this is a good example of where you don't, because the variable a is in the numerator of a fraction. So we're going to multiply both sides of that equation by 3. When you do that, you're going to be canceling out these two 3's. They cancel out, and 5 times 3 will give you 15. So now we're going to have 15 equals a minus 4.5. That's the next line in our solution, because a is having 4.5 subtracted from it. We're going to add 4.5 to both sides. 15 plus 4.5 will give us 19.5. We have 19.5 equals a. Flipping that around, e equals 19.5. You don't have to flip it around. We're just accustomed to seeing the variable on the left-hand side. That's the only reason I did it that way. You don't have to. Okay, number 3. Everyone can see number 3 here. We have negative 3.1 minus m equals 2.7. The negative sign in front of the m, it's important that you keep your eye on that, you don't lose it, okay? The negative sign is attached to the m. Keep it there. You'll see in the next line here. When we look at this equation, we can see our variable m. Where's my pen not showing? There it is. So our variable m has the term negative 3.1. So we're going to add 3.1 to both sides of this equation. The negative 3.1, the positive 3.1 are going to cancel out. 2.7 times 3.1 plus 3.1, excuse me, is going to give us 5.8. Here's that negative sign. It's important we bring it down. We bring down the negative m equals 5.8. We're not solving for negative m, we're solving for positive m. So what you have to do is multiply through on your equation by negative 1. You could also divide by negative 1. Some people say divide by negative 1, multiply by negative 1. Gives you the same thing. What it does is it takes your negative m, makes it positive, and your positive 5.8 makes it negative. So our final solution is m equals negative 5.8. Okay, notice on all three of these equations, we're looking for that variable and we're using inverse operations to isolate it. Often adding and subtracting first, then either multiplying or dividing to get the variable by itself. Okay, question number 4. Negative 17.8 equals negative 2.4 minus 2d. Lot of negative signs here. Don't worry about them. Just remember, if you're trying to get rid of a negative term, you have to add to it. Okay, our variable is d right here. When we look to see what's on the side of the equation with it, we see negative 2.4. To get rid of that negative 2.4, it's this negative in front of it here, not the other negative. We're going to add 2.4 to both sides of this equation. We have a negative 17.8 and a positive 2.4. Those are different signs, so you have to subtract them. When you subtract those two numbers, you're going to get negative 15.4 equals negative 2d. Okay. Pardon me. So we bring down the negative 2 with the d here. There we go. Bring down that negative 2. Don't lose your negative sign. And now d is being multiplied by negative 2, so we're going to divide through by negative 2. Make sure you're dividing both sides of your equation by negative 2. When we divide negative 15.4 by negative 2, we get positive 7.7. So d equals positive 7.7. I wish I could say I'd like to ask you some questions and hear what your questions are, so I'm sorry I can't. But what you can do is always pause this video, rewind it a little bit, just go back and look over the information again if you're not too sure. Okay, also you have this answer key with all the solutions available, so you can look it through that way too. All right, number 5. Let's see, is it showing up there? Yep. 3/5 x minus 2 equals 7. The variable's x. It's being multiplied by 3/5 and 2 is subtracted from it. So we have to add 2 to both sides of the equation. When we add 2, the negative 2 and positive 2 will cancel out. 7 plus 2 is 9. And so our new equation is bringing down the 3/5 x. 3/5 x equals 9. We have a fraction for a coefficient. When you have a fraction for a coefficient, you multiply by its reciprocal. So I'm going to flip over that 3/5 and turn it into a 5/3. And we're going to multiply both sides of this equation by 5/3. Because the 3/5 times the 5/3 is going to be 15 over 15 or 1. All these will cancel out, the 2 3s and the 2 5s. So that means we just have our x. And now we're multiplying 9 times 5/3. When you cancel out the 3 with the 9, you get x equals 15. Okay, so that's number 5. Now we're going on to number 6. Somewhat similar problem here in that we have a fraction. We have 2/3 times the quantity m minus 3/4 equals 9/5. Now, you could distribute that 2/3 across the sum, but let's not do that because that's just going to be more work for us. Let's go ahead. This is one of those exceptions. We're not going to add or subtract first. We're going to multiply first. What are we going to multiply by? We have a fraction for a coefficient. We're going to multiply by its reciprocal. So here where you see The 2/3, we're going to multiply both sides by 3/2. Both sides of the fraction are getting multiplied by 3/2 here and 3/2 here. That cancels out the 2/3. That'd be 6/6 or just 1. So we no longer have this factor. All we have on this side of the equation is m minus 3/4. On the other side of the equation, where we multiplied 9/5 by 3/2, that's going to give us 27/10. Can't cross cancel anything on that, so we just multiply straight across and get 27/10. New equation, m minus 3/4 equals 27/10. We're going to now add 3/4 to both sides of this equation. That's the only thing over here with the m. It's almost alone, but still has a negative 3/4, so we're going to add 3/4. You cannot add tenths and fourths in these forms. You have to get a common denominator, which will be 20. So convert 27/10 into 54/20, multiplying by 2/2. And convert 3/4 to 15/20. You're multiplying by 5/5. So now we have 54/20 plus 15/20, which is going to give us 69/20. And we really don't want to leave it as an improper fraction. You could, but I'm going to go ahead and divide it out. When I divide 20 into 69, that goes in 3 times the remainder of 9, 3 and 9/20. Okay. We are getting there, just 2 more questions left. Number 7. Down here we have the equation 3/8 equals 2/3 plus 4y. 3/8 equals 2/3 plus 4y. Once again, we're going to use inverse operations. We're going to subtract 2/3 from both sides of this equation. Subtract 2/3 from 3, excuse me, yes, okay. 2/3 minus 2/3 cancels out. We have nothing there. And then we have to take 2/3 away from 3/8. Our common denominator is going to be 24. So I have it over here. 3/8 converts to 9/24. 2/3 converts to 16/24. When we do this subtraction, notice that 3/8, which is only 9/24, is smaller than 16/24. We're going to have to reverse the order of our subtraction. We don't want to take a smaller number, a bigger number away from a smaller number. We're going to go into the negative, so we're going to reverse the order. When we reverse the order, we have 16 minus 9, which will give us negative 7/24. Okay, so we have negative 7/24 equals 4y. Now, how am I going to get rid of this 4? You're going to be dividing the 4, but when we have a fraction on the other side, it's easier just to multiply by 4's reciprocal. Remember, every number has a 1 underneath it. So 4's reciprocal is 1/4. So we're going to multiply by 1/4 on both sides of this equation. 1/4 times 4 is 1. So we're just left with y. And 1/4 times negative 7/24 is going to give us negative 7/96 for the final answer right here. Okay, last question. We have a mixed number here, a couple mixed numbers. See what we'll do in just a second. First thing what we're going to do is notice our variable is n right here, and it is having 3/4 subtracted from it. It's multiplied by 2 1/4 and minus 3/4. So we're going to subtract 3/4 from both sides. This is a we're going to add 3/4 to both sides. This is a negative 1 3/4. Negative 1 3/4 plus 3/4. Those are different signs, so we end up subtracting them. And we get 1. The larger number was negative 1 3/4, so our answer is negative 1. What do we have on the right-hand side still? Excuse me, left-hand side. Negative 2 1/4 n equals negative 1. Change this negative 2 1/4 into an improper fraction, and you'll have negative 9/4 n equals negative 1. Then multiply by the reciprocal again. The reciprocal is also negative. Negative 4/9 times negative 9/4 gives us positive 1 for n's coefficient. We're multiplying -1 times -4/9, we get +4/9. So our final answer is +4/9. Okay, so that was a lot of problems for you guys to work through. And now I'd like you to go ahead and print out or write down the, let's see, I think you have a total of 16 questions. I have to remember now, I don't have it handy, of equations you're going to solve using inverse operations or two-step equations, and then you'll put your answers on the Google form. You'll choose, just like we've been doing, you'll choose the correct answer and submit that. Okay, email if you have any questions. Hope this was understandable, and have a good day. Bye-bye.